An experiment. Welcome to this lecture. I'm going to talk a bit about the special case of men in art therapy. And what I want to do is I'm going to show you some images, and I'm also going to talk not about the images, but I'm going to talk at the same time as you are watching the images. And when I've finished, I would like you to put either in the question and answer section for this lecture, or just to jot down your own thoughts for yourself. Maybe your thoughts will have been affected by the images that you see, beautiful images, etc., etc. Or maybe you find that you will disagree with what I have to say. Maybe not. And that's the experiment. You're not just watching or listening to me. You're looking at something that I hope will put you in a good mood. And I'm going to say a few things that I hope you will find interesting about men in art therapy. And I'm going to ask you to share your thoughts in the question-answer section. Following that, there'll be another 30 seconds or so of brilliant artwork. Again, to encourage you to share this course, to tell others, to get people involved. Okay, let's talk a bit about men in art therapy. Okay, I hope you're sitting back enjoying the images that are in front of you. Now, the very concept of men who work as art therapists, men in art therapy, really this whole idea of men being involved in art therapy is bound up with the issue of male recipients of art therapy services, and by men I mean men and boys. And there's a book by William Pollock. It was published in 1998, and it was called Real Boys. And the central theme was that boys and men in US society, and probably in societies around the world, was that men and boys must comply, almost a sort of social enforcement. They must apply to a rigid sort of boy code or male code. And this code places on a pedestal, it values toughness, independence, emotionally reserved stoicism. This is a circumstance that creates a mask of masculinity. He says that on page 3 of Real Boys. And William Pollock's thesis takes into account the various societal, environmental, physiological, psychological pressures that all have an impact on male development. But these pressures also provide a context for understanding these themes of male recipients of art therapy services and men and boys in art therapy. Pollock wrote about the double bind that boys are in, because boys, and this is very much the case certainly in the UK in public schools, certainly in the 1960s, 1970s, and up to a point in the 1980s. If somebody hits you, for example, I'm talking about public schools now, if somebody bullies you, you don't report them. You take it, or even better, you man up and fight back. And I'm just going to give you a case that I know of, and I'm sure that there are many others, In 1966, and I say in advance that this may repel you, because we're talking, 54, 55 years ago, there's a case of a newcomer to this particular school, public school, quite well known. It's near Basingstoke in the UK. And the newcomer, he's aged, I think, 12, and his testicles, I apologise in advance, his testicles dropped rather early. And so he was grabbed, and the fastest runner in that cohort, age 13, he's the form above, was given a piece of string, and the other end of the string was tied round this first person's testicles, who was rather plump and rather slow. And the fast boy ran round the field with the fattish guy struggling on behind. Now, I don't know if in later years they were emotionally scarred. Certainly the plumpish guy, who's now in his 60s, is a partner in a quite well-known firm of solicitors in Guildford, and he seems fine. Both of them went on to captain their rugby teams at different levels for their boarding school. Perhaps it didn't harm them. And there's another case of someone who had great anxiety, and this caused him to soil his underwear. And every day, people would kick him, just to see if there was a squelch, just to see if there was any softness in the kick. He left the school after about a year of this bullying. Now, I know that both of these anecdotes are true because I was at the school. I also know that at least 10 pupils of my year and the year below, over the next 30 or 40 years, sued the school for allowing is the wrong word, for not stopping abuse. And this is not Eton or Harrow, it's not an incredibly well-known British public school, it's just a public school. And that was the code in the 1960s, 1970s, maybe even 1980s. This stiff upper lip, the grin and bear it. Don't snitch on people. Now, William Pollock in Real Boys, he wrote about the double bind that boys are in, that they had to act in a tough, conventionally guy-like way. But also, remember we're talking about 1998 now, they would find themselves chastised when they don't act sensitive or caring or empathic enough. He says this on page 82. And some of these boys, these double-bind boys, caught between being act tough but also act sensitive or caring, grew up to become art therapists. And there's an essay called The Middle Man by Michael Franklin. And he addressed this struggle for identity equilibrium from both a philosophical and personal perspective. And he argued that to be successful in a field like art therapy, the male must maintain a balance. Remember the double bind I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. Must maintain a balance between cultural messages of masculinity and the need to connect with others on a profound emotional level. So we're back to this tough, conventional guy, but on the other hand, sensitivity, caring, empathy. And Pollock makes the case that, and I quote, all of the behavioural qualities that we associate with girls, empathy, sensitivity, compassion, are also basic male traits. He says this on page 346. But the point is that with boys, males, society privileges qualities that conflict with these values. We want our men to be strong and independent and tough and go and fight wars. And yet, males have these qualities: empathy, sensitivity, and compassion. And so going back to Franklin's essay, it would seem that middle men who exhibit elements of both of these qualities have reclaimed this heritage. Now, the experiences of male art therapists were further researched by Jeremy and Heather Michelle Riddle and Robert Tavani. Riddle and Michelle Riddle looked to see if there are specific character strengths shared by men in the field. And the findings suggested a trend towards particular personality characteristics that seemed to be a good fit for the profession. In Tavani's case, he researched a variety of topics relating to men's experience in the profession, including the participants' awareness of the field's gender imbalance. Certainly, male membership in AATA, American Art Therapists Association, is around 6%. So as a percentage, very, very few males. I think it's reasonable to assume that as a percentage, in terms of clients, there'd be very, very few males as well. Precisely because I would suggest these characteristics of empathy, sensitivity, and compassion, which are needed and which are highlighted, which are drawn out from the point of view of clients, have been submerged, or not wanted, shall we say, by the society in which males grow up. Now, in Tavani's case, his data didn't seem to support the conclusion that this disparity discouraged prospective male students. His data just didn't seem to agree with it, but he surveyed only those men who did enter the profession. A more complex and interesting explanation could be that women's talents for nurturing drew a portion of artistically inclined women into art therapy to fulfill a desire to help others. Certainly there's been many cases of female and male applications to be or to train as art therapists, and they've stated that this combination of art and altruism are the prime reason for pursuing an art therapy degree. Far fewer men seem to arrive at this formulation. Is this evidence of Pollack's theory in Real Boys that society's push for independence in boys has the undesired effect of creating a generalized sense of emotional disconnection in many boys and men? I leave that thought with you, that the reason that there are so few male art therapists, the reason that there are so few male art therapist clients, is not because the need is not there, not because the desire to be an art therapist is not there, but these societal pressures the physiological, psychological, environmental and societal pressures that have impacted and still impact male development, even now in 2020, discourage males from applying to train as an art therapist, and also to seek out art therapy because of the very qualities which they may well have: sensitivity, compassion, empathy. They suppress because they feel, rightly or wrongly, that society does not welcome the manifestation of such cultural and character traits. So, you've been sitting there listening to me and looking at beautiful images. What are your thoughts about this? Please put them in the question-answer section for this lecture. Thank you.